Welcome to the Canadian Women's Foundation's annual Digital Town Hall. Thank you for joining us. My name is Andrea Gunraj, and I'm here with my colleague, Rachel Leslie. Just a reminder to you, portions today will be in French and in English, so please note the translation button in Zoom. It's down at the bottom of your screen, down to the right-hand side, interpretation. Please select English or French, whatever is your preferred language. Please also note that we have closed captioning in English and in French. You can click on the link for English, that one live transcript down at the bottom, or in the chat, you can find the French closed captioning. I'm just going to drop it for you there in the chat. So the work of the Canadian Women's Foundation and that of the programs we support takes place on traditional First Nations, Métis, and Inuit territory. We are very grateful for the opportunity to meet and work on this land, but we recognize that land acknowledgements are not enough. We need to pursue truth, reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in an ongoing effort to make right with all our relations. If you want to learn more about the land that you're on today, I encourage you to visit nativeland.ca. It's available in English and in French, and the link is in the chat. Over to you, Rachel.
Bonjour. La Fondation canadienne des femmes, c'est quoi? Nous sommes la fondation publique du Canada en faveur de l'égalité des genres. Nous aidons les femmes, les filles et les personnes du genre divers, trans, deux esprits et non-binaires à se sortir de la violence et de la pauvreté et à renforcer leur estime de soi et leur leadership. Et cela n'arrive que grâce à des personnes qui se sentent concernées par la situation, tout comme vous. La Fondation canadienne des femmes, pourquoi est-elle si importante? Parce que nous avons tous besoin d'un Canada égalitaire entre les genres, maintenant plus que jamais. Lorsque nous arrivons à la justice entre les genres, tout le monde réussit. Et pourquoi nous sommes-nous rassemblés ici aujourd'hui? Nous voulons vous faire part de ce que votre action et votre soutien à la Fondation ont permis de réaliser et de ce qui reste à faire ensuite.
Thank you for that, Rachel. So please make sure you stick around to the end of the event. We have prize draws, and we are really excited about what we'll be able to give away today. Please note that we are recording this event. We can't see you on the recording right now, just want to let you know that. We're also hosting a brief question and answer period a little bit later. If you want to participate, please go ahead and type your questions in the question and answer box. Again, down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see Q&A. Please note, we won't be checking the raised hand functions. We won't be able to see that. Along the way, feel free to type your comments in the chat. We have moderators to ensure safe and respectful conversations. And just a bit of a content note. We're going to be addressing gender-based violence in various points along the way. So I encourage you to take care of yourself. Step away if you need to, come back when you're ready. And if you would like to find services that might help you in your region, please visit the support services page on our website. I'm dropping the link in the chat for you there. It's available in English and in French. And thank you for your patience in advance if we run long. Now, here's an overview video of the impact that you have had on gender justice, both in numbers and in stories. Watch this.
Hello, everyone. We're ever so thankful to you as tireless change makers for gender justice. Between April of last year, 2021, to March of this year in 2022, donors and partners of the Canadian Women's Foundation, our community of over 2,500 caring people, enabled over 520 grantee programs in every province and territory to support women, to support girls and gender diverse people to move out of violence, out of poverty, and into confidence and leadership.
That's nationwide impact to be proud of. You made a positive difference in the lives of over 1 million people. And these numbers are big. That's the scope of change that we all have the honor to being a part of. But let's not forget that change happens in the lives of people like you and like me. Let's bring it to a level that we can all relate to. There are real people behind these numbers.
Only 6% of sexual assaults get reported to the police in Canada. Many survivors of abuse simply don't feel safe enough to report. Maybe they're afraid they won't be believed. Maybe they worry the legal system is too traumatizing to navigate. For those who want to report, they might need an advocate to go alongside them, someone they can trust, who really cares about them. Your support enabled our grantee partner, Sexual Violence New Brunswick, to strengthen the Victim Advocate Program. The timing here is key because gender-based violence, like sexual assault, has spiked over the last 2 years. One person who went through the program said that, without the program's help, I would have quit the legal process months ago. With the Victim Advocate Program's help, I was able to go through a trial and still live my life. I was able to see that there's more to my recovery than seeing the person who abused me in prison, that this is about me and my mental health, not him. This is one example of how you help women, girls, and two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people move out of violence and rebuild their lives.
In 2021-2022, our partners and donors enabled the Canadian Women's Foundation to invest in over $31 million into our communities. Your generous giving leads to strategic and rounded action for gender equality and justice all over Canada. You help our grantee partners provide services in their local communities. You enable learning and connecting opportunities for our grantee partners to build on their collective strength. And you also enable advocacy initiatives that spark that systemic, lasting change. The contributions from donors and partners, from people like you, help us meet the immediate needs of the most vulnerable women, girls, and gender diverse people, break down gendered barriers that fuel the feminist movement for gender justice.
Cela signifie beaucoup, car 30 ans de gains en matière d'égalité
This
des
means a
genres au
lot
Canada
because 30
ont
years
été
of gain
ébranlés au
for
cours des
gender
2 dernières
equality
années.
in Canada have
Grâce
been
à votre
shaken
soutien,
throughout the
les
few
femmes
last
vivant
years.
dans la
Thanks to your
pauvreté
support,
peuvent
women living in
accéder à des
poverty
programmes
can now
d'emploi qui changent
access
la vie.
employment programs
Les
that
filles
change
et
their
les
lives.
adolescents peuvent suivre des
Girls
programmes
and
qui
teenagers
renforcent leur
can be
confiance
part
en
of
elles,
programs where they
leurs
strengthen their
compétences en matière de
self-esteem, their
relations saines,
skills, their
leur
interpersonal
résilience, leur sentiment
skills, their
d'appartenance
resilience,
et leur
their
santé mentale. Les
belonging,
survivants
and their
d'abus
mental
et leurs
health. The
enfants ont une
abuse
chance de se
survivors and their
libérer
children
et d'obtenir
have
les
the
services
chance
dont ils
to
ont
liberate
besoin pour
themselves and
reconstruire leur vie.
access the services they
Les
need to rebuild
organisations
their lives.
locales de femmes
Local
et de défense
organizations,
de la
women,
justice
local
entre les genres
organizations
peuvent
uh,
s'associer à des projets de changement
can
pour agir sur les causes
contribute
profondes
to
des
change
problèmes.
project and act
Le
on
pays est
the root
vaste,
causes of
il est
problems.
complexe.
Our country is
Nous
huge
devons
and
faire face à
complex.
l'héritage
We
du
must face
colonialisme, au racisme systémique
colonialism,
et aux
systemic
conséquences de toutes sortes
racism,
de discriminations qui
heritage, and
se
the
traduisent
consequences
par
of
des
all sorts
résultats
of
différents
discriminations that
pour chaque
manifest in
personne en
different
fonction de
results
son
for
identité.
each
Il y a
person
beaucoup à
according to
faire.
their identity. There is
Voici
still
un
a
exemple
lot
de
that
ce que
remains to be
votre
done.
soutien
Here's an
généreux
example
permet de
of what
faire
your generous
dès maintenant.
support
In
enables us
Canada,
to do
women are more
right
likely
now.
than men to live in low-income households, childcare and elder care pressure, little money for training and education, experiences with sexism, racism, ableism, and sexual harassment at work. There are so many barriers that get in the way of a better life. This is why your support of Women Unlimited in Nova Scotia is essential. This grantee partner helps diverse women build careers in trades and technology, fields that are male-dominated. Women Unlimited tries to clear barriers in the way, providing things like childcare and transportation for program participants. One woman in the program told us, being a single mom who has only held customer service jobs, I knew that I could not continue living the rest of my life like this. I wanted better for myself. And my kids deserved better. When you're told all your life that trades are not for women, an internal fire gets lit to prove those people wrong. Women Unlimited helped me figure those things out. My confidence and capabilities are now improved, and I'm happy that I made the choice to make a change. This is just one example of how you help women, girls, and two-spirit trans and non-binary people move out of poverty into economic stability.
184 of our grantee programs serve First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. 219 programs serve remote, rural, and northern communities in Canada. These communities may be more isolated. They may not have stable internet or cell phone connections. Transit options may be limited. A woman may have to travel miles to get basic services. Gender justice programs here do so much for the people they serve. They know how to meet the needs of their communities, and they're dedicated to it, even as it's more challenging than ever. We're particularly honored to partner with Make Way Foundation on the Northern Strategy, guided by a Northern Women and Girls Advisory Committee with representatives from Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, Nunavik, and Nunatsiavut. They're indigenizing grant making for gender justice in the North, and they've identified 4 key granting goals. Uplift women and family and community through the reclamation of Indigenous culture and tradition, empower programming by Indigenous health and wellness institutions, and increase cultural competency in public health and wellness institutions, center and reconcile gender relationships in family and community as a pathway to end violence, and expand culturally appropriate, community-driven, and secure childcare to reduce barriers to economic independence. One grantee funded through the Northern Strategy is the Northern Birthwork Collective. It leads an accessible doula support program and Indigenous doula training that offers culturally safe, gender-inclusive care. The collective aims to grow and revitalize traditional birth and perinatal practices. And did you know that 275 grantee programs serve girls and young people? These include teen healthy relationship programs to prevent gender-based violence and programs to support girls and non-binary youth to develop confidence and resilience, right when they need it most. Listen to this.
As girls approach adolescence, they face higher levels of sexual assault and other forms of gendered violence, a decline in mental health, and negative stereotyping and sexualization. In grade 6, 36% of girls say they feel self-confident. By grade 10, this falls to only 14%. This is why your support of a girls program in Huayat First Nations in British Columbia is so important. The program name translates to steer the canoe in the right direction. This grantee partner helps girls to develop meaningful relationships while strengthening cultural identity and mental health. A staff member there told us inclusion, family connections, and time to have fun together were so important to the girls during this time when social interactions were limited to households and girls were lonely and disconnected. For many of the girls, the program provided an opportunity for girls to participate in some cultural activities for the first time. For example, many girls had never stripped cedar bark, harvested the Devil's Club plant or seafood, or paddled the Kli Ha canoe. This is one example of how you help girls and young people move into confidence, belonging, and healthy relationships that can last a lifetime.
You help build economic development for women and gender diverse people too. Our grantee partners help their participants gain employment skills, training in new fields, entrepreneurship success, and work opportunities. But did you know about our investment readiness program? It helps women-serving organizations develop innovative businesses that do environmental, cultural, and social good and generate financial resources. This unique model can help gender justice organizations both fund and boost the positive change they create. 69 organizations have become investment readiness grantee partners to get funding, training, and mentorship support.
Dans l'ensemble, vous permettez à la Fondation canadienne des femmes d'être
You
une voix
globally
nationale
allow
forte,
Canadian
un
Women's
leader
Foundation to be a
d'opinion et un
strong
partenaire
national
sur des
voice
questions
and a
urgentes comme
leader
les
in terms of
services de garde
opinion
et
and an
l'éducation,
important
la
partner that
prévention de la
speaks
violence
out
sexiste,
for
de meilleures
childcare,
conditions pour les mères et les
sexist
proches
violence
aidants, de
prevention,
meilleures
better
conditions
conditions
pour
for
les
mothers
travailleuses de la
and
santé et les travailleuses de
caregivers,
première
better
ligne,
working
et la
conditions for
protection des
healthcare
femmes, des
workers
filles
and
et des
frontline
réfugiés
workers
de
and
diverses
protection of
identités de
girls
genre.
and women of
Votre
diverse gender
soutien permet
identity.
également des
Your
opportunités de
support
développement
also
professionnel, de
contributes to
formation et de développement
professional
des
development
meilleures pratiques
opportunities, to
pour
training
les
and
leaders
the
et les
development of
prestataires de
best
services en
practices
matière de
for
justice de genre.
service providers
Nous avons organisé
in the
des
field of
webinaires
gender
sur les
justice. We
pratiques de
have organized
décolonisation,
webinars on
les impacts genrés
decolonizing
de la pandémie sur
the
les
gendered
communautés et
impacts of
la
the
prestation
pandemic
de services,
on
la réponse aux
communities
besoins de
and
femmes réfugiées et des personnes
services,
2S
the
LGBTQIA+,
needs of refugee women
la
and
justice pour les personnes handicapées et plus encore.
2SLGBTQI+,
Et les voix
and
comptent,
women
dans les
in
médias comme
handicapped
partout
women.
ailleurs. Vous nous avez permis
In the
d'offrir
media
annuellement le
and
prix Landsberg pour le
everywhere else,
journalisme
you
féministe,
have allowed us
co-présenté
to
avec la
offer
Fondation pour
an
le
award
journalisme canadien,
for
en
female
l'honneur de la
journalism
journaliste Michelle Landsberg.
to Michelle,
Cette année,
in
le
honor
prix
of
a été
Michelle Landsberg, a
décerné
great
à
journalist.
Christina
This year, the
Frango
award
pour
was given
ses
to
articles
Christina
sur
Frango
la
for her articles
discrimination
on
dans les systèmes
discrimination
médicaux et
in
juridiques.
medical and legal
Écoutez une autre histoire
systems.
de votre impact.
Please listen to another story
On
about your
average, a
impact.
woman is killed by her intimate partner every 6 days. Indigenous women are killed at nearly 7 times the rate for non-Indigenous women. The number of femicides, clearly already too high in Canada, has actually gone up during the pandemic. This is not just a matter of individual cases here. These are systemic trends that need to be broken, and new safety measures must be put in place on a system-wide level, or more lives will needlessly be taken. This is why your support of our grantee partner End Violence Against Women Renfrew County, or EVA Renfrew County, is so important. In 2015, Carol Culleton, Anastasia Kuzik, and Natalie Warmerdam were murdered by their former partner in Renfrew County, Ontario. An inquest was held to understand what happened and what will prevent femicides in the future. So with a grant from the Canadian Women's Foundation, EVA Renfrew County worked with legal experts to hold public consultations to understand the changes that needed to happen from a community level. At the end of the inquest, the jury recommended that the province declare intimate partner violence an epidemic and made 85 other groundbreaking recommendations. This is just one example of how you help women, girls, and two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people move into leadership and make those all-important systemic changes.
So we've had a steep learning curve over the past few years at Canadian Women's Foundation, like everyone else has. And we've had to figure out how to bolster gender justice programs that were struggling in every region to keep up with the unpredictable community needs. And it means that we've had our own challenges in terms of being able to resource up to meet funding needs. And along with that, we've also had to figure out how to connect with people who care at a time when rallying together has been more challenging than ever.
But there's good news. We are seeing unprecedented interest in gender justice. More people want to be part of the change and to take action. We've learned that we need to focus on urgent needs without losing sight of the big picture. We need a big tent with lots of ways for people to get in on the solutions. And we'll bring these lessons into the future because shocks and shakeups will be inevitable.
So we're making other changes too. We're progressing on systemic anti-racism action plans. Our youth advisory team of young feminists is supporting the foundation to be more responsive and more relevant to young people, not just today, but also into the future. And we're launching into strategic planning so that the foundation can truly rise to the challenges of the day.
Again, our deepest thanks to our partners and donors, grantee programs, board and staff teams, and our many volunteers and followers. None of this impact for gender justice is possible without you. Read more about it in our latest impact report at canadianwomen.org. And please keep watching for more exciting updates, the ones you've made possible, because together we are tireless.
On a travaillé sans relâche. On s'est battu pour la cause. Et ensemble, on a réécrit l'histoire. Plus d'une fois. On a fait bouger les choses à coups de persévérance. Sans jamais s'asseoir sur nos lauriers. En se disant plutôt, on le veut et on le vaut. Parce qu'on sait que lorsqu'un moi devient des milliers, des millions de nous, c'est fou. C'est ce qui nous pousse à nous tenir debout, à ne pas s'arrêter tant que le Canada tout entier ne sera pas avec nous. Nous sommes les persévérantes et ensemble, nous atteindrons l'égalité des genres.
Hello, everyone. Coming back in. I'll ask my panelists to please come up on screen. Wonderful. Great to see you folks here. So our chat was disabled there for a minute and I got worried. I thought nobody's here and everybody's so quiet, but really glad to see you saying your pieces and introducing yourselves in the chat. Please go ahead. Lovely to see you. If you have questions, now is your time. Please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And with the translation and interpretation, just let you know at the bottom of your screen as well, too, you can pick the options that work for you. So with us right now, I've got Paulette Senior, our president and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation. We've got lovely Karen Campbell, director of community initiatives and policy. And we've got wonderful Olga Savistin, vice president of finance and operations. And I should say Paulette is also wonderful too. So here's our first question. Let's go to Rachel.
Oui, la première question, c'est pour...
Hello, my first question is for Paulette. What is the Canadian Women's Foundation doing tomorrow, September 30th, for the National Truth and Reconciliation Day?
Thank you for that question, Rachel. And I also just want to say hi, everyone. Great to see your chats, and it's exciting for us, you know, albeit virtual, but you know, it's good. It feels live, and that's great. So yes, tomorrow is an important day, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So, you know, we at the foundation with our staff team, we use this opportunity to do a learning day where we read, we listen, we watch material, and we discuss issues that sort of have been created by Indigenous folks in Canada. We're also very mindful that any movement on reconciliation doesn't come without truth. So we need to prioritize, and this is what we do. We prioritize grounded learning and some discussion on what the next steps are that we as a foundation need to take. And what better time than now as we're kind of at the beginning of our next strategic planning process. And then we've learned a number of things through resources. So what we've done is that we take the opportunity to share learning resources, and we can actually share that with you on our website. So I invite you to take a look at canadianwomen.org/blog/September 30th in both official languages, where you'll be able to learn more. And I'd like to especially point out our September 7th All Right Now What podcast, which is an episode on First Nations, Métis, and Inuit youth featuring two incredible women, Taylor Arndt and Tori Chief Calf. These two amazing women speak to their leadership in terms of writing our 2022 report on the impacts of COVID-19 on First Nations, Métis, and Inuit youth. It's very enlightening, so I encourage you to take a look. So listen to All Right Now What anywhere that you actually are able to access your podcast content. And I'd like to finally just encourage you to check out the One Day's Pay campaign. It is a guide by the Circle on Philanthropy to mobilize settlers to meaningfully recognize and commemorate the tragic history and legacy of residential schools, as well as to honor their survivors, their families, and communities. So this year, they aim to raise funds for Indigenous-led organizations, and I invite all of you to take a moment to visit onedayspay.ca, where you'll be able to learn more and support Indigenous-led organizations. And I guess one final thing is, don't forget to wear orange, your orange t-shirts or orange anything, to commemorate the day tomorrow, to just indicate that you are indeed in support of this important moment in Canada.
Thank you so much for that, Paulette. And just to let you know, folks, go ahead and ask your questions in the chat. If we don't get to them fully in this meeting, we will send answers out afterwards. Look forward to that on Monday, so please go ahead and do that. I have a question for Karen. We always get a lot of great questions on how organizations can apply for funding from the Canadian Women's Foundation. It's a really good question, and we have grant streams that open and close. It can be a bit confusing. Just give us an overview on the process.
Sure. Thanks, Andrea. We have a great team of grant makers on our community initiatives team that are preparing to launch calls for proposals in 3 of our areas in the coming months. So I'll tell you about those. In the video, you heard from Sagal, our colleague who is leading our investment readiness program. This fall, likely in late November, the team is getting ready to launch a call for proposals to help build the capacity and investment readiness of social purpose enterprises and to boost women sector participation in the social finance market. This is to get them ready to receive investments and grow their enterprises. You can apply if you are planning to develop or to launch or to grow a social enterprise, for seed funding for smaller scale projects, or if you're working on a collaborative project to address systemic issues related to gender and social finance. So that's one opportunity. In December, we will be launching a call for our community needs grants. These are grants that we offer every year, and the aim is to provide short-term support for organizations that are doing gender-based work. We focus in that stream on smaller grassroots organizations, and we aim to meet a range of immediate needs. So you can apply to cover existing program costs, to pilot something new, to do some policy or advocacy initiatives, to build networks, or even to cover operational or admin expenses. So it's a pretty broad call, so look for that in December. And then later on in the spring, we'll be launching another multi-year call for proposals for our Rebuilding Lives grant stream. These are 3-year grants to support programs for women, girls, Two-Spirit, trans, and non-binary people to rebuild their lives after experiences of violence. So that will be coming not until the spring, but yeah, you can look for that one in April. And you can find out more details about those grant streams and how to apply on our website. And I think Andrea is going to pop the link in the chat for you.
Thank you so much. You have some really great questions here. Again, we don't have the time to answer all, but we will afterwards, and we'll be sending out a recording of this event as well as a link to our annual impact report on Monday of next week. Stay tuned to that. We've got all your information. We'll make sure that gets to you. Olga, over to you. We'll be sharing that impact report next week, and it actually includes some detailed financial information as well too. This is always of really great interest to people. People have great questions around this. So give us a high-level overview, where the money came from, and where it went to, and what that fiscal year looked like last year.
Thank you, Andrea, for this question, my favorite subject. Canadian Women's Foundation is very unique. We do not rely on one single source of funding. Currently, we have 3 major sources of revenue: government grants, and last year they accounted for 85% of our funding, and they were at about $28.6 million. Fundraising revenue accounted for 10% of funding last year at about $3.5 million, and investment income It contributed 5% to our last year's funding at about $1.6 million. How did we spend this money? Well, of course, first of all, grants are the major category. We've disbursed about $24.3 million in grants in the last fiscal year. $7.5 million were spent on charitable activities and program-related expenses. Also, we've spent about $700,000 on admin expenses and $740,000 on fundraising expenses. Our charitable ratio for fiscal year ended in March 2022 was at 96%, and both admin and fundraising expenses are at 4% each. Although these are very good indicators, as a foundation, we don't believe the charitable ratio is the only or the best indicator of the organizational performance. When we work with other organizations, we look at different factors, and of course, impact is the biggest. We believe that nonprofit organizations need to invest in the talent and systems that create a foundation for healthy growth. When nonprofit organizations are able to invest adequately in staffing, infrastructure, they are much better off and they are much better able to carry out their own missions. I all encourage you to read our impact report, and there is a lot of interesting financial related and other information. So please do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Olga. Really appreciate that high-level overview, and I appreciate the analysis on why we have to look at what organizations need in a really intelligent way. I have a question actually for you, Karen. We have a lot of questions coming in around gender-based violence, and some of the questions are, where can we go for help? So can you just give a high level? If people need support, if people are looking for resources, someone to talk to, where would you recommend right now?
Yeah, there's a number of places that you can go for support. I think the first suggestion is to look for resources that are in your community. So you can, check and see if there is a women's shelter or a sexual assault center locally that you can reach out to. They're probably best positioned to provide you with support that you're looking for. There's also information available online. The Assaulted Women's Helpline is another place that you can go to for support, that they can refer you to places that could assist you. There is also the Residential School Survivors Hotline as well for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit folks who may be looking for support. And I think about that particularly tomorrow in light of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, that the conversations that we are critical and that we need to be having in our communities at this time can be very triggering and difficult for people with lived experience of colonization and the harms that has caused. So those are some places that I would suggest. And for those of you who may be talking to people in your lives who have experienced gender-based violence and they're coming to you for advice or support or even just to talk, we do have our signal responders resources, signalresponder.ca, to help you to have those conversations with folks in your lives.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm dropping in the chat as well, too. I see some other resources there. Thank you for sharing that. 211 is a great place to call anywhere in Canada. You let them know what you're looking for. They'll let you know where you can go. I'm also dropping this link in the chat, sheltersafe.ca. Our friends at Women's Shelters Canada have really impressed upon us that you do not need to be staying at a shelter or transitional housing to get support from shelter workers. Shelter workers can talk to you. They may have other programs and services available that can help you in your situation. You don't need to be leaving a violent situation. You don't need to have a lawyer. You can just give a call and talk to somebody who's kind and caring and knows their stuff. So sheltersafe.ca, and you can find a service in your area that might be relevant to you. All right, I'm going to go over to you, Paulette. So I saw some questions. It's a really great question about disaggregated data. This is always the thing. We need to know data about all kinds of things related to gender justice. We have a lot of gaps in Canada, and somebody is asking, are we planning to do anything around disaggregated data? Are we doing stuff around research? It begs the question about our strategic plan that we're working for. We're trying to see what are the gaps gaps in Canada. We're looking for the goal of gender justice and we're planning towards that. So it brings up that high level question. What's the strategic plan process going to be like? What are we looking forward to there?
Thank you, Andrea. So clearly the hot news is that we are at the beginning of a new strategic planning process. And I think as we hopefully are easing out of this pandemic, it couldn't be a better time to try and reimagine what the future can look like and plan for it accordingly. So a very exciting time. And I'm so glad to see some folks that were former board members and donors are checking in, because I know that this is something that they would want to hear about as well. Yeah, so disaggregated data is important and will be informing how we develop our strategic planning process going forward. So what the data tells us, for example, is that, you know, it's important that as we're thinking about communities that are most impacted before, during, post-pandemic, that we really need to think about where the critical investments are needed. And so having a strategic plan that is informed accordingly will help us prioritize and identify what the priorities are as we kind of move forward for the next 3 or so years strategically. So this is an exciting moment for me. If anyone knows me, they know I love to be engaging in strategic conversations and figuring out the path forward. And so this is what we'll be doing over the next few months, and bringing it forward to our board, engaging many, many stakeholders, either directly or through surveys or what have you, to really have input, wide input into what those directions should be. So please don't be shy. Share your perspectives with us. Tell us what you think about how we're doing now, but also where do we need to be going at this point in time. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Paulette. And as part of that strategic planning process, we will have a survey going out. I know many of you might be grantee partners and partners of the foundation already. So that survey will allow you to also in more detail share what's going on in your community. What are the priorities for you? I do notice somebody also mentioned a question about housing strategies. Will we be looking at housing strategies? Well, we have to. This is a huge issue in Canada today. And we know that housing and homelessness and underhousing is a cross-Canada issue, and it's a gendered issue. I'm dropping a link in the chat to the Women's National Housing and Homelessness Network. You asked if there's an opportunity to volunteer on stuff related to gender justice and housing. I recommend these partners. They're amazing. Their website has a ton of resources, and they have the capacity to join in. That's a good start. And please, this is a great question. I'm so glad people are talking about housing and homelessness. All right, we just have 3 more minutes, slim amount of time. I'm going to pass it back to Olga. I have a question for you, Olga. Okay, there's tons of people, amazing people who are behind this impact at the Canadian Women's Foundation. Shout out to everybody who helped us even today, but shout out to our whole team. Please share a bit about who are the people behind who's making this happen and why we're so grateful for our incredible colleagues.
Thank you, Andrea. Our staff team, although not very large in size, is super efficient, and they have been working really, really hard, especially at this time of huge emergency funding going out to the grantees in pandemic response. We would not be able to have this impact if they didn't facilitate it. We are thankful, but we are also mindful about supporting the health and well-being of our team, because we know these continue to be very challenging times. And of course, huge thank you to our board and volunteers too, who gave off their time because they care about gender justice. So thank you all.
Thanks, Olga. We'll pass it to you, Rachel.
Oui, on veut juste noter que nous enverrons à chacun le lien vers cet événement et aussi le rapport annuel d'impact.
Yes, please note that we're going to send you out a link to this next week. And now, please watch this.
Bonjour,
Je suis Jacqueline,
Hello, my name is
gestionnaire des
Jacqueline.
initiatives
I'm a
communautaires avec la
manager
Fondation.
of community
La nation de
initiatives with the
Kanien'kehá:ka est
foundation.
reconnue comme étant
Kanien'kehá:ka
gardienne des terres et
Foundation
des eaux
is
sur lesquelles je me trouve
a
aujourd'hui,
guardian of
aussi
the
nommée
waters
Montréal.
and land that I am on
Entrepreneur
today.
est un de nos bénéficiaires de
Entrepreneur is
subventions
one of
qui
our
viennent en aide aux
beneficiaries
entrepreneurs des
that
territoires du Nord-Ouest, du
helps
Yukon et
entrepreneurs
du
in
Nunavut
the
à surmonter
Northwest,
les
Yukon,
obstacles à
and
la
Nunavut
croissance
to
des
overcome
entreprises.
obstacles to the
Entrepreneur
growth of
soutient les
companies.
entreprises
Entrepreneur
autochtones qui renforcent les mythes de
supports
vie du Nord et
Indigenous
honorent les
enterprises
façons
that
culturelles
reinforce
d'être, de
the
savoir et de
ways
faire.
of life in the North and
Une participante
that
du programme,
acknowledges
Vashti Etzel, déclare: « J'ai quitté le
native
programme avec
knowledge.
beaucoup plus de confiance que lorsque
One
j'ai
person said, I
commencé.
left the program with a
Cela
lot
a
more
constitué
confidence than
une
when I
part
began, and that
importante de mon parcours de
makes an
guérison
important
en tant
part
que
of
femme
my
autochtone
healing
se
process
lançant dans
as
les
an
affaires.
Indigenous
Je sais
woman who
maintenant
is
que je suis au bon endroit,
getting
que
into
je fais les
business.
bonnes choses
I know
et
that
que j'apporte
I'm
un
doing the right
sentiment
thing, I've done well,
d'autonomisation
and I'm
aux femmes
bringing
qui portent mes
a
vêtements. »
feeling of
Voilà un exemple de la manière dont
autonomy.
vous aidez les femmes,
Now,
les filles
here
et les
is one of the
personnes
ways that you help
bispirituelles,
women,
transgenres et non-binaires à
girls,
sortir de la pauvreté et à accéder
Two-Spirits,
à la
and other
stabilité
people to
économique.
access
Merci.
economic stability. Thank you.
So in June, we had the privilege of partnering with Women's Shelters Canada and YWCA Canada on a discussion between two iconic journalists, Eternity Martis and Anna Maria Tremonti. They spoke to the stories behind the statistics on gender-based violence, starting with their own. Anna Maria Tremonti is a longtime journalist for the CBC. She was a senior reporter for The National. She hosted The Current as well. In February, she published Welcome to Paradise, a podcast memoir, and for the first time, she disclosed her experience in an abusive marriage. Eternity Martis is a journalist and editor who worked with the Huffington Post, Chatelaine, Maclean, CBC, The Walrus, and more. In 2021, she published They Said This Would Be Fun: Race, Campus Life, and Growing Up, her best-selling memoir. Please watch this clip of what they shared.
So it did take me 40 years. I am now in my 60s, but when I was 23 years old, I married a man who abused me, and I didn't see it coming. And when it happened, I didn't understand, but I understood immediately that he was blaming me for his rage that he took out on me. And he actually said, you know, you drove me to this, see what you made me do. And I internalized that immediately and blamed myself. And so when it happened again and again, I thought, well, I should act differently. Maybe if I just was, you know, I said something, I set him off. If I could just find a way not to set him off, this won't happen. I lived in that marriage for a year, and I say just 1 year because I feel very lucky that I got out after a year. And I left. A lot of women, when they try to leave, are threatened with murder. I was actually told if I didn't leave, that he would kill me. He said to me, if you don't leave, I'll kill you. It'll just be a matter of time. I didn't believe him. But I left, and then I came back with, you know, plans to make it better. And he made it pretty clear in the way that he assaulted me the next time that he meant it, and I left. I think that the thing that beyond the physical abuse that surprised me and I didn't really identify until I kept moving forward was the fact that there's a long tail to this kind of violence in not only who you feel you can trust because you've been betrayed by someone who you trusted and loved, but also the idea that the shame and the self-blame that you carry with you. And I've talked to so many people, even since the podcast has come out, and everybody talks about their shame. The long tail of this kind of abuse, it surfaces in that shame and self-blame and makes people feel, and certainly made me feel, unworthy on many levels, even though outwardly I kept moving forward in a career. I have a voice that makes you think I know what I'm talking about, even when I don't. And so even my closest friends, when I finally told them, couldn't really believe this had happened to me, because we have all these stereotypes around who could be a victim and a survivor of intimate partner violence. And what I've discovered and what I understood early on was that we pass each other on the streets every day, and we don't understand that we share this kind of trauma. And we still live in a society that wants to hive it off and wall it off as individual things. And that's finally, I got to the point where I felt I could tell that story, and I chose to do it in a podcast.
Yeah, I actually had a bit of a similar experience there where, and Anna Maria, in your podcast, you talk about this of kind of being relatively new to love and to dating. And I was as well. I was 16. And so I was very much an outsider my whole life, grew up multiracial in a Pakistani household. I was very emo, and there were no emo Black kids in my high school. And so I just kind of felt very lost. And around 16, I had a growth spurt, changed my style. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to have a boyfriend. But I don't think I had ever thought about what that meant to be a girlfriend, what a relationship was. And like a lot of folks who are from South Asian backgrounds or other cultures, we don't really talk about dating and relationships in our families. And so everything I learned was from the OC, from Gossip Girl. It was all these shows where men were aggressive and they showed that they loved you through hurting you. And so I met my boyfriend at the time. He was East Asian, and that was kind of the first barrier for me, that I had not realized that race was going to play a role in our relationship, which ended up coming out later. But it wasn't an immediate kind of physical violence type of relationship. It started very, I think a lot of therapists call it the frog in the hot pan, where I saw things and they felt intuitively like red flags, but I just wasn't sure. And so I never said anything. So it would be, your friends are a bad influence on you. You shouldn't hang out with them. So isolating me. You hang out with your mother too much. Why don't we hang out this weekend? Sometimes it was pinching my legs. He would pinch my legs if I wore something too short, so I wasn't able to wear skirts and dresses. And a lot of it was emotional. So kind of keeping tabs on where I was, saying things to make me kind of stay in line. And I think the most shocking thing for me was, again, this idea that I, for some reason, and I know you've spoken about this too, Anna Maria, didn't think it could happen to me. And there was no good reason for thinking that. I thought, well, I came from a home, a great home. I have, I'm in school. Why would it happen to me? And at that time, I was in high school. So I was teaching other students how to read the red flags. That was my job. So I was showing all these other younger students, this is what happens and this is when you should leave. But it was happening to me and I wasn't doing anything. And so I ended up going away to Western University. And a big part of the reason that I went was because I wanted to escape him. He actually applied to Western so that we wouldn't be separated. He didn't get in. And I was like, okay, that's my cue, I'm going. And it had gotten to the point where there had been no physical violence, but he was starting to threaten it and say, well, I'm very strong. I could, one punch and you would be dead. And the reason that I moved away before breaking up with him was because I didn't want to hurt my family. And we ended up having a very volatile relationship where I would go to him and then want to break up with him. And a lot of that was because I was in a new environment. I was actually experiencing a lot of racism for the first time, being in a very white, conservative Christian city. And so he was kind of the only person that I had who was like a friend. Like he was really my best friend. And this continued for a while. And a lot of my friends, when I confided in them, we were all 17, 18, 19 years old. And they also didn't understand what that meant. So I would say, well, he did this thing to me. And they said, well, you're a Black woman, like you're Black. Why don't you just fight back? And I quickly realized that there was an assumption that he couldn't be an aggressor, but I was supposed to be the aggressor. And so I kept very quiet. For a while, he was kind of stalking me, showing up at my dorm unannounced. And finally, when things ended, they had become physical. And at that point, I was doing my master's of journalism. I graduated from Western. And I was kind of wondering, like you said, this kind of long tail. When does it end? When will I feel like myself again? 6 years have passed. I'm engaging in all these self-destructive behaviors. I don't know when I'm going to feel good. And so I ended up writing my book and realizing that in writing the book and doing the research, so many young women of my age, so many of my peers were going through the exact same thing, but none of us could really recognize it happening until we were out of it and talked to each other. And so it did become a large part of my book. And it was just because for the fact that this is happening very often, and women ages 15 to 24 are the most at risk of intimate partner violence, but it's still an age group we don't discuss and we don't talk about.
So I just want to say thank you, sincere thank you to Anna Maria and Eternity for sharing your stories with us. And you can find the full conversation on our YouTube channel. The link is in the chat there. It's available in English and in French. And what I appreciated is that they spoke about their stories and they also spoke to solutions as well to what needs to happen from their perspective. So many thanks for that wonderful and important and difficult conversation. Now, switching gears, I have a story to share with you. Our grantee partner, Luso Community Services in London, Ontario, leads a program called Heard Zine League. It helps girls develop media literacy skills that think critically about gender stereotypes. Girls learn how to use media to share their own positive and empowering messages. A youth worker at Heard told us one girl in the program was new to both Canada and the London area. With the school year being mainly virtual, she was having difficulty meeting friends and she'd been bullied. Halfway through the program, her mother phoned us to thank us. It was the first time her daughter talked about having new friends. The mother reported that her daughter's self-esteem and confidence in overall mood and mental health had greatly improved since the beginning of the program. It was wonderful to see her come out of her shell and share her art with the group. She even helped some of the other girls in the program with different art techniques. And this is just one example of how you help girls and young people move into confidence and belonging and healthy relationship that can last a lifetime. You know, these stories can be very quiet. We might not hear about them very often, but when we do, we know it makes a difference. And I thank you for your support to help make that happen. So the Honorable Rosemary Brown, I wonder if you know about her. She was one of the founding mothers of the Canadian Women's Foundation. She was born in Jamaica and she came to Canada in 1951 to attend university. She faced pervasive discrimination. It propelled her to become a leader against racism and sexism. By the mid-1960s, this woman had 3 university degrees, including a master in social work. She was a member of the BC Association for the Advancement of Colored People. In 1972, she made history by becoming the first Black woman elected to a Canadian legislature. She made history again in 1975 when she became the first Black woman to run for leadership for a federal party. It seems that perhaps the video is still playing in the background. Just want to let you know that if you need to stop that in the background, please do so. Hope you can still hear me. I'm pretty loud. So Rosemary Brown, she had a 14-year career in provincial politics. She pushed for legislation to prohibit gender-based discrimination, and she worked towards improving services for immigrants, people with disabilities, people who were elderly, and also other marginalized groups. Paulette Senior, I think you said this very well, our president and CEO. She said, we follow the path set by Rosemary Brown and other visionary feminists, not simply because the goal of gender justice is a worthy one, though it is. It's the solution to the most pressing social concerns we face today. So I'll cue us up, see if we can watch that video now with some sound. Go ahead.
Lorsqu'on me demande pourquoi je fais partie du mouvement de libération des femmes, je réponds toujours « parce que je suis une femme ». On m'a souvent dit que parce que je suis une personne noire, on s'attend de moi que je ne me préoccupe que de la discrimination faite aux personnes noires. Mais pour moi, de ne pas participer au mouvement de libération des femmes serait comme renier ma féminitude.
Rosemary Brown est née en Jamaïque au sein d'une famille de femmes fortes et éduquées. Elle est venue au Canada en 1951 pour étudier à l'université. Comme étudiante à McGill et plus tard à l'Université de la Colombie-Britannique, Rosemary faisait face à la discrimination persistante. C'est dans l'adversité qu'elle a trouvé sa vocation comme chef de file contre le racisme et le sexisme.
En effet, je suis doublement choyée. Je suis une femme et je suis noire. Et d'être une femme noire dans une société raciste et sexiste offre une opportunité unique où les choses ne peuvent que s'améliorer.
À la fin des années 60, Rosemary était mariée, avait 3 enfants et 3 diplômes universitaires, dont une maîtrise en travail social. Elle était membre de l'Association de la Colombie-Britannique pour l'avancement des personnes de couleur et était panéliste fréquente à l'émission nationale People in Conflict.
Si le mouvement de libération des femmes ne soutient pas les combats des pauvres, des races oppressées, des personnes âgées et des autres groupes marginalisés, il n'atteindra jamais ses buts. En n'offrant pas ce soutien, il isole les multitudes de femmes qui constituent une grande partie de tous ces groupes.
En 1972, elle est passée à l'histoire en devenant la première femme noire élue à une assemblée législative canadienne. Elle est passée à l'histoire de nouveau en 1975 lorsqu'elle est devenue la première femme noire à se présenter aux élections d'un parti politique fédéral. Rosemary Brown a été membre de l'Assemblée législative de Vancouver-Burrard jusqu'en 1986. Durant sa carrière de 14 ans en politique provinciale, elle s'est battue pour des lois interdisant la discrimination basée sur le sexe et a travaillé pour l'amélioration des services offerts aux immigrants, aux personnes handicapées, aux personnes âgées et aux groupes marginalisés. Les années au pouvoir de Rosemary ont montré aux femmes de toute provenance qu'elles peuvent faire une différence. Durant les années suivantes, plusieurs autres femmes ont occupé des postes dans des commissions et conseils d'administration partout en Colombie-Britannique.
Ce pays, le Canada, est beau et fort grâce aux personnes des deux sexes et de toutes les races. Sa force et sa beauté n'auront d'ampleur que celle équivalente à sa capacité à accepter et respecter tous ses habitants également.
Accept and respect all of its inhabitants in Canada.
So Rosemary Brown, of course, is really important for the Canadian Women's Foundation. She said, of course, until all of us have made it, none of us have made it. And that's why we have the Rosemary Brown Giving Collective. It's a community of like-minded monthly donors who share a tireless commitment to gender equality. It's very special. Becoming a monthly donor is one of the most powerful ways you can have year-round impact on the lives of women, girls, and gender diverse people. Your support will sustain essential community-based programs and enable long-term interventions to advance gender justice. Please consider joining the Rosemary Brown Giving Collective because you'll make a powerful and long-term investment in a better future for all of us. /RBGC to learn more and get started, and the link is in the chat there. Okay, we're going to move on to talking about our shock-proofing and out-of-violence impact. First of all, have you heard about the signal for help? The signal for help is a one-handed signal that you can make, perhaps in a video call, perhaps when you're face-to-face with somebody. It's palm up, thumb tucked in, fingers trapping thumb. Please watch this.
Lockdown led to a dramatic increase in domestic violence, with abusers constantly monitoring devices and listening in on calls.
This signal for help.
It's a campaign by the Canadian Women's Foundation.
We developed a hand signal that can be slipped into a video call.
We used this global shift in video calling and invented a new way for women facing domestic abuse that they could call for help without leaving a digital trace. You face your palm to the camera, you tuck your thumb, and you trap your thumb. It means I need help and I need you to check in with me safely.
We launched with organic posts, designed with simple instructions on how to use the signal if you need help and what to do if you see it being used. It linked to a social media toolkit that an army of over 200 women's groups instantly downloaded, customized, and shared. Then we followed up with a PSA.
I know your mom's a great baker, so should be good.
Exploding on TikTok, it became social activism on a global scale. Amplified by influential voices, the signal has made headlines in over 45 countries.
Reported by women who used the signal to seek out help.
Syrian YouTuber Saif used the hand signal on her channel, triggering her subscribers to alert the authorities. Followed by this global news story from the US.
Brooke is in police custody this morning, accused of abducting a teenager.
Authorities say a hand signal she learned from TikTok may very well have saved her life.
In Spain, police detained a man after they saw a woman use the signal during a routine traffic stop. Another man was detained after a woman used the signal in a healthcare clinic. Mobilized by a global community, the signal for help continues to be recognized as the silent call for those who need help.
Gender-based violence tends to spike in crisis times and disaster times, but it doesn't have to. We launched our shockproofing project to do three things. We want to spark culture change through our Signal for Help campaign, which you just watched a video about. We want to do research on the policies and practices Canada needs to prevent spikes in gender-based violence altogether. And we want to create opportunities to share and act on these learnings. So I've got my colleagues here, Pamela DePinto and Karen Campbell. They're going to talk about this effort, and it spans individuals, families, workplaces, communities, and our broader culture and societal landscape. First question for you, Pam. You know, a lot of people, I think nowadays, know about the Signal for Help, but they may not know how to respond to gender-based violence. How can they learn?
Yeah, for sure. That's really common and honestly understandable that people might not know how to respond to gender-based violence, but that's why we've created some resources to help. So to learn how to respond, the best and probably the easiest thing to do is to sign up to be a Signal for Help responder. And you can do that at signalresponder.ca or our companion website in French. And when you sign up, you automatically receive the Signal for Help Responders Action Guide. And this is a really practical tool. It goes step by step into how to respond to the Signal for Help. And it provides some just more general tips and resources for how to support someone who's facing abuse. And when you sign up, you also have the chance to enroll in an email learning journey. And this is where we go deeper into the issues and we share some stories and invitations to different events and trainings. So it's really dynamic, it's really varied, and it's meant to help you learn as you go, because we know that this type of learning doesn't happen all at once, and we can all learn how to respond in better, more helpful ways. And really excitingly, we've actually had more than 27,000 people who've already signed up to be Signal for Help responders. So when you commit to do this, you're joining this really amazing growing community.
That's really fantastic. It's so exciting to see people eager and learning and joining on. Please, signalresponder.ca is the place to sign up today. So Karen, I'd love to hear more about what you're learning in terms of research on how we can shock-proof our communities against gender-based violence.
Sure. I mean, since the pandemic began, we've been working with researchers and community-based organizations who do that direct service work for women, trans, and non-binary people experiencing violence. And we've learned a number of things. First off, our research really speaks to the importance of moving past the idea that these spikes in gender-based violence are inevitable. There's absolutely no reason that we should take for granted or accept that an outcome of community stress should be violence against women, trans, and non-binary people, particularly those who are from the most marginalized communities experiencing these crises the most acutely in the first place. So, you know, shock-proofing our communities against these increases really requires that culture change work you were talking about. We need to double down on healthy relationships and consent education. We need to build cultures of community care. We need to improve the material conditions of the most marginalized communities and put an end to gender-based violence in what we would call normal times, so that in times of crisis, communities are equipped to adapt and respond without violence. Another thing that we've learned about in the wake of the pandemic, we worked with researchers who took a deep dive into emergency preparedness and response plans at the provincial and territorial level. And we were unable to find any plan that included an intersectional gender-based analysis or approach, or that spoke meaningfully to gender-based violence as an outcome of emergencies or crisis situations. And I think it's interesting to note that the federal government does require that a gender responsive approach be applied to humanitarian or emergency or crisis relief efforts that Canada engages in internationally. But they haven't mandated the same approach be applied at home. They've provided some guidance to provinces and territories on how to do that, but they haven't said you must do that. So to shock-proof our communities against gender-based violence in times of crisis, we need to make sure that emergency responses at all levels are accounting for and responding to the lived realities of gender-based violence survivors and their families. You know, as we've observed in a range of community level crises, we see that organizations serving women, trans, and non-binary people are at the forefront of community responses, but they aren't always thought of in that way. And so we've seen how they've had to make huge shifts from the service provision that they normally do to things like creating food hampers, you know, to address food insecurity, to making sure that the message is out there that even if there's a stay-at-home order, that the shelters and sexual assault centers are open. That was a big thing that was missed in the pandemic. You know, so really it's about how they are experiencing strain on their already stretched resources and staff. And so a key point about shock-proofing in our communities is that we need to have a strong, thriving, and sustainably funded women's and gender justice sector. Those organizations need to be set up for success and have the surge capacity that they need to make those service pivots in a crisis time while maintaining their capacity to provide longer-term life-saving supports that their service users need.
Thanks, Karen. That's such an important project right now. We talked about how gender-based violence spikes are going to happen more and more often as we see more crises, big disasters, climate change related stuff. So this is really timely and powerful stuff. Let's move to Pam again. The Signal for Help Responders campaign has started like more than a year ago, and people have signed on and have gotten learning all along the way. They've done some exciting things. They've come to events. They've got great emails, great opportunities to read more and get deeper in the issues. Tell us, what are the exciting things they can expect in coming months?
Yeah, we have a couple of things I'd like to mention. So in mid-November, in time with the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence, we're actually going to be launching an online course to help you learn how to better recognize and respond to signs of gender-based violence. So it's going to be like a remixed version of a lot of what we have out there, but we've repackaged it in a way that it's going to be free, it's going to be accessible, and it's going to be something that you can do at your own pace. We've really tried to take the most important topics on this issue and distill them down into short modules that you can do at your own choosing in whatever order you like and when you have the time. We know that's a big one. So we've really tried to make it as easy as possible to complete this type of learning. And then in the new year, we'll actually be launching a special podcast series under the umbrella of our current podcast, All Right Now What? And this podcast series is going to feature some personal stories and some expert opinions all around this issue of gender-based violence. It's going to have a lot of heart built into it, and we have an amazing production team behind us, so I know it's going to be really powerful. And I should say that both the online course and the podcast will be bilingual. So if you'd like to stay informed about when these are going to be available, make sure you sign up to be a Signal for Help responder.
Thanks, Pam. And as a podcast lover, I'm particularly excited about that podcast coming up in the next year. So Karen, tell us a little bit more about what's next for the shock-proofing efforts.
Sure, there's lots of exciting things happening in the coming months. Our team is working with our partners at Women's Shelters Canada to organize a summit in Ottawa at the end of March. We're bringing together over 500 gender-based violence organizations from across the country, and it's going to be the first major in-person gathering for the sector since before the pandemic. So we're really excited to be able to see our colleagues in person, to reconnect, and to have some really critical conversations about what we've learned over this period, and to develop and further our strategies to shock-proof our communities. This sector-wide piece, along with the ongoing research and advocacy work that we're doing, all of the work that Pam and team are doing on the Signal for Help Responders campaign, the podcast, these are all really important pieces of our work to address gender-based violence in Canada.
I stayed out of it.
I wondered if it was any of my business.
I kept quiet.
I haven't always known how to help.
But not anymore.
Because if you're experiencing abuse,
If I see you use the violence at home signal for help,
I will not judge you.
I will know what to do.
I will help you.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Nathalie Jean-Charles, gestionnaire d'échange de connaissances.
Hello, my name is Nathalie
La nation
Jean-Charles. I'm with the
Kanien'kehá:ka,
Knowledge Exchange
Mohawk,
Manager.
est reconnue comme
The
la gardienne des terres
Kanien'kehá:ka
et des
Mohawk
eaux sur
Nation is
lesquelles je me
recognized as the
trouve
guardian of
présentement.
the lands
Elle
and
est
waters
également
on which
connue
I
sous le
am
nom
right
de
now.
Montréal.
I am currently on
Partenaire
the island of
bénéficiaire, la Maison
Montreal.
Marguerite de
A
Montréal
grantee
au
partner,
Québec
the Maison
offre
Marguerite
un
in Montreal,
programme
Quebec, offers a
d'art-thérapie
program, an
appelé
art
l'art de
therapy program. It
reconstruire
is
sa vie.
called The
Il
Art
donne aux
of
femmes
Rebuilding
du
Your
refuge
Life.
des
This
outils
program
créatifs et des
offers
stratégies
women
d'action
creative tools
collective
and
pour les
collective
aider
action
à faire
strategies
face à
to
la
help them
violence qui les a menés à
face
trouver la
the
sécurité au
violence that
refuge et
forced
à
them
les
to seek
permettre de
shelter
reprendre leur place dans la
and
société.
to help them
Un
recover,
participant du
reclaim their
programme
place
a
in society.
déclaré
The
ceci:
participants in the program
J'ai
say
vraiment
the following:
bénéficié de l'environnement
I
serein
truly
où
benefited
on m'a
from the
montré
serene
comment gérer
environment
mon
of the
anxiété
program where I
avec
was taught
différentes
how to
activités.
manage my
Certaines
anxiety with
des activités qui
different
m'ont aidé
activities.
ont
Some of
été
the
le
activities that helped
jardinage,
me
un
were
tableau de
gardening and
visualisation que je construis, le travail
visualization,
avec de l'argile et la peinture.
working with
J'ai
clay
appris
and
qu'il
painting.
n'y
I
a pas de bonne
learned
façon de faire les
that there is
choses.
no
C'est
one
ce que je
right
crois
way to do
vraiment.
things,
Ce
and I
programme
truly
m'a
believe that
beaucoup
this program
soutenu.
has really supported me.
Ceci est un exemple de la façon dont
This
vous
is an
aidez les
example
femmes,
of
les filles et
the
les
ways in
personnes
which you
bispirituelles,
help
trans et
women,
non-binaires à
girls,
sortir de la
trans, and
violence et à
non-binary folks
reconstruire
to
leur vie.
get out of violence and rebuild their lives.
So we are so thankful for all the people who signed up to become signal responders already. And if you haven't already, please do so at signalresponder.ca. And the French link is also there in the chat, responderappel.ca. And I think that you will really appreciate just the information that you get right from the top. We'll send you a guide to help you be able to respond to gender-based violence, and you'll get into the future other things like emails and opportunities to get training and more events. And this is just to help train us to become the best supporters we can possibly be for people experiencing violence in our lives or people at risk of violence. I believe this to be very important because that's the way we change cultures if every one of us knows how to act and support somebody who needs our help. So we're going to switch gears, and I'm going to talk about our latest national poll. It revealed the challenges that parents and caregivers believe their children aged 9 to 19 have faced over the past 2 years. And these things include low self-esteem, a lack of confidence, bullying, isolation, maybe a lack of belonging, problems resolving conflicts, and mental health concerns. And I saw some of you folks asking questions and speaking about mental health concerns. It's a big topic today. And 1 in 3 parents and caregivers said their children have struggled with unhealthy relationships over the past 2 years. Our grantee partners, funded through your generosity, helps provide safe and supportive environments for girls and young people, and they need those spaces now. By giving to Got Your Back, and the link is there in the chat, you can ensure that these programs continue to be there for young people. I think it's really important for us to remember that young people are not only our future, but we got to make sure they're well now so that as they grow, as they develop, they can be healthy, positive, supportive, safe, and respectful in the way that they interact. And it will address things like gender-based violence, things like bullying, the things that we are very concerned about today. So please watch this. It's a video that features 2 of our Girls Fund grantee partners explaining how they make a difference in their communities today. Watch this.
So the Community Arts and Heritage Education Project, or KHEP, we run Speak Up for girl and girl identified youth and non-binary students in grades 7 and 8. And those who are just about entering high school and who really need a connection to a community and perhaps the arts community before they head off to high school, so that they can have that connection to hold on to and a network to build off of during that time. There is a comfort and a sort of a becoming yourself that kids experience being involved in the arts, and when that's taken away from schools, they really, I think, lose that ability to play, to think creatively, to see things from different viewpoints, and to really experience, these different areas of maybe who I am, who do I want to become, who inspires me, who are the types of people that I want to be around, that I want to model myself after, that I want to aspire to be, all that kind of stuff. So the loss is really, it's almost too big to really describe. So I think that it's so important that, projects like Speak Up sort of take the place of that loss and help students to not only just learn practical art skills and learn and be inspired to be artists, but also realize that you can become a leader through the skills you develop in those different art projects as well. It doesn't have to be necessarily about the art itself. It can be about those other things you learn through that process.
So within our project, we are using the 4th R Healthy Relationship Plus program. And we're providing training to teachers and guidance counselors in our districts to implement as a part of the grade 8 health curriculum. So the program within itself is a 14-session program. It's evidence-based, it's a strength-based approach that really helps young people to be able to learn the foundations and knowledge they need to be able to develop healthy relationships, but also more importantly, being able to teach them the skills that they need to not only build healthy relationships, but as well as to be able to manage, mental health, as well as being able to help friends in need who are also struggling with mental health. What I have found throughout my times in implementing the program is that often students, are sometimes a little hesitant to engage, particularly about talking about like these kinds of topics about relationships and mental health. But often by the time the program has started, by like session 2, students are very much engaged and interacting in the program. And what we have seen is that students have really, by the time the program is finished, that they've really not only increased their knowledge about healthy relationships, but as well as being able to implement and display and transfer the skills that they learn in the classroom outside to other classrooms, as well as into their own life. We did choose grade 8 because, we really wanted to use that window of opportunity where we know that, friendships, peer relationships have a significant influence in their life, and many may be considering entering into an intimate relationship, or maybe are already experimenting with dating. So we really wanted to provide them with this knowledge and skills at a time when it was going to be very relevant to them and that they could use before entering into high school. It's really important to be able to engage them in activities that they're going to enjoy. We've always found that the small group discussions has been incredibly useful in facilitating that information, as well as games and activities that help them to not only move around, but also to interact with others. And as well as the topics of conversation that are in the program really relate to things that are relevant for students in their life right now. So some of the content that has generated some great discussions have been things like characteristics and signs of healthy and unhealthy relationships. Being able to think critically and examine the role and influence that media has on your life and your friends and the decisions that you make in your mental health, as well as being able to have conversations about mental health, the myths and the stigmas that surround it, as well as coping strategies, and as well as being able to deal with peer pressure and peer influence while maintaining your boundaries. And finally, being able to help a friend who reports that they are experiencing and struggling with their own mental health.
So of course, that's an example of our Girls Fund programming, but we also have teen healthy relationship programs and other ways for young people to build the field of teen healthy relationships and promote gender justice. The reality is that we have to do our best to support young feminist leaders. They're essential to building gender justice. I know I became a feminist and I became a leader in this space when I was young. When you do it when you're young, you grow and you can do amazing things. And that's why the Canadian Women's Foundation really supports these young leaders as they develop and grow in their efforts. So watch this update. It's about our Youth Advisory Committee that Paulette mentioned earlier on. And it's followed by a bit of an update on what your support has enabled our grantee partner to do to build women's leadership in their community. Watch this.
Nathalie, tell us a bit about the Youth Advisory Committee, the young feminists on that group. What are they here to do? And tell us a bit about their goals.
Yes, they're a group of youth who are working and are very passionate about gender justice. They are coming in from different walks of life, different experiences, different regions, different nations. And they're here to tell us how they want gender justice to be advanced in a way that reflects the realities of young people across Canada.
So tell us a bit about what you've learned, their insights. I know they're not shy at all to give us their thoughts, their opinions, their critiques. What have we learned so far?
Yes, that's one thing they're not shy. And they really are telling us how we should be doing gender justice work. And they're not afraid to ask us to push a little further, to think about things a little bit differently. So what I love about working with them is reimagining how stuff that we've been doing one way for a long time, how we can reimagine doing it in a different way that's more inclusive, that's more reflective of the voices of the young people that they want us to be paying attention to. So, for example, things that they have left us with is this youth engagement strategy set of recommendations that we're going to be using at the foundation. We have already started using to make our work more reflective, and they learned how the foundation works and every pillar and every department, and made sure that the recommendations were targeted towards each department. And so they've put a lot of thought, a lot of work, a lot of effort into learning how we do things to ensure that they give us recommendations on how to better do those things.
Hello, I'm Rivka, Community Initiatives Coordinator. I'm on treaty land and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe and Chippeways people, the land that is home to the Métis and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. Grantee partner Long Lake 58 in Ontario offers digital skills to Long Lake 58, a First Nation-led economic development program. Here, participants learn important skills that pave the way toward employment. The impact ripples out in incredible ways. One of the program's staff members told us a star participant continued as mentor this year while also working on her own jewelry business. At the same time, she runs our internet cafe and supports the lead instructor as lead mentor during classes. This is one example of how you help women, girls, and two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people move into leadership opportunities.
So I just want to thank you for your attendance, for your patience with us when we've had some tech issues, for sharing resources, for asking questions, for your comments. And I want to thank particularly staff supporters who made this possible today. There's a lot of people who behind this, in front of the screen, doing things to make it happen, doing tech stuff. It's scary to do events online. I find them very intimidating, and I know that people really worked very hard for this. So I just want to thank you all. And I really appreciate just the ways that you make everything happen at the Canadian Women's Foundation. And now we have a very exciting opportunity to win a gift basket from one of our generous partners, the Society of Beer Drinking Ladies. Over 7 years, these women have raised over $50,000 for the foundation's work, and they've grown into North America's largest women's beer community. They're learning and they're growing, and they're really creating a safe space for women and women-identified people. Check out their upcoming events at ladiesdrinkbeer.com. And Rachel, tell us which one of our attendees has won today.
Bon, donc on va attirer la personne qui va gagner le panier cadeau aujourd'hui.
All right, we're going to draw the winner, and today it'll be Rox Bartel.
Félicitations. Et on va vous contacter sous peu pour...
Congratulations, we're going to contact you soon. So you can receive this gift by the mail. Thank you very much.
Your bilingualism never ceases to amaze me. And I really appreciate all of our bilingual staff today who just made this happen, our ASL interpreters, our interpreters, just vocal interpreters, our closed captioners. There's just so many people who I am appreciative of today. And you still have a chance to win a book prize pack. It features Indigenous and Black women writers we love at the Canadian Women's Foundation. To enter, you simply fill out the feedback survey about this event. The link will be in the chat and it will also be sent to you afterwards, and it will also be up on screen at the end of this event. We really want to know how we did today and what more you would like to learn about. We really appreciate your honest feedback because this helps us do better. So please let us know what you think and expect more opportunities to give us your feedback, your concerns, your thoughts, your ideas. As Paulette mentioned, we are in strategic planning mode. We really want to plan for the future and do the best we can to build a gender equal Canada today and gender justice for us into the future. So moving forward, there's lots of ways that you can take action for gender justice with the Canadian Women's Foundation right now. You can join the Rosemary Brown Giving Collective if you have the opportunity to give. You can become a Signal for Help responder by going to signalresponder.ca. You can listen to our All Right Now What podcast. You can follow us on social media. There is something for everyone, and you don't have to just do one thing. You can pick the things that work for you and that make a difference for you. And the truth be told, there's no Canadian Women's Foundation without you. There's no gender justice without your tireless action. Now's the time, so let's do this. Thank you for joining us today, and please stay close. Have a great rest of the day. Bye, folks.